I first saw the notice on a bulletin board at university. It said they were hiring for summer work, someone to watch the forest from a tower, looking out for fires. The pay looked good, and honestly, the idea of isolation in nature sounded like an adventure. Before we dive into the story, tell me from which country you're listening and what time it is there right now. So I applied. Now I wish I hadn't. I left the city behind, driving into the wilderness for 3 months. 3 months alone. It's only been a few days, yet already it feels like weeks. Out here, there are no houses, no people, no cars, only endless trees, a sea of green swallowing everything. It's beautiful, and it's terrifying. The forest feels alive, hiding things I can't see. Too thick to peer through, even near the top of this mountain where the tower stands. The air is clean, sharp in my lungs. Sunlight breaks through the canopy in dappled fragments. It should feel freeing, but fear lingers behind every breath. I push the fear aside. There are things here that could kill me. Bears, wolves. That's the first thought that jumps to mind. I shake my head, refusing to dwell on it. Instead, I keep walking up the path toward the watchtower, where Mr. Heinrich said he'd be waiting. When I reach the porch, he steps out. "Hey, kid," he greets warmly. He looks older than I imagined from our phone call, mostly gray hair, with strands of black still clinging at his temples. A full, neatly kept beard, eyes kind, his smile steady. "Good to finally meet in person," he says, extending his hand. I shake it, awkward and unsure what to say. "So, this is the tower?" I ask, glancing at the building with its glass windows on all sides. He chuckles. "Yep, wait until you see the view. First though, let me show you around inside." Inside, Mr. Heinrich walks me through the basics. The place is small, one room doubling as kitchen and living area, a propane stove tucked in a corner. The bathroom is narrow, equipped with a composting toilet that must be emptied into a pit every few weeks. No shower, no tub, just an outhouse for when nature insists. Then he shows me the bedroom. It's barely large enough for two, if they didn't mind being close. A single bunk rests against the wall beneath a southeast-facing window. The direction, he explains, where most forest fire activity happens. "This'll be your little corner," he says. I nod, trying to absorb everything. We return downstairs, then climb the metal staircase outside, leading up to the observation platform. He gestures out over the vast forest. There it is, the grand tour. The view takes my breath. It feels like the top of the world, though only 50 feet off the ground. Mr. Heinrich points to distant landmarks, explaining how far visibility stretches in each direction. He shows me the binoculars and spotting scope fixed on a tripod. "Your job's simple," he says. "Look for smoke. If you see it, radio it in. If you see flames, well, you may need to head down there with a shovel." I nod. He smiles, trying to ease me. "Don't worry, it's not usually that dramatic. Most days are quiet. Just keep scanning every hour. And don't fall asleep at the wheel." He winks. I don't really get the joke. "You'll be fine. Just don't do anything stupid. No smoking, no candles." I nod again. Seems obvious, considering the forest is bone dry. He pats my shoulder, then descends the stairs. Soon he's driving off in his truck, back toward civilization. He promises to check in next week. When the sound of his engine fades, silence hits me hard. Isolation swallows everything. It feels like being dropped on another planet. Mars, maybe. Alone, with no training, no real idea what comes next. I remind myself, this was the point. To get away from everything. To lose myself in nature. So I start with cleaning. The tower isn't messy, but dust clings to corners. I sweep, wipe down surfaces, put things in order. While brushing beneath the bed, I find something. A notebook, old and brittle, its cover gray with dust. No dates, just pages filled with lists, supplies, procedures, radio codes, emergency numbers. But further in, it changes. The entries become personal. Different handwriting, different voices, spanning years. And then one page stops me cold. A list of rules, Don't look outside after sunset. If you hear steps on the stairs at night, hide. If you see something staring from below, pretend you didn't. Don't answer voices calling your name. They aren't real. The writing ends abruptly, mid-thought. I laughed at first, nervously. It had to be a joke, something left behind by a bored lookout, maybe even Heinrich himself playing a trick. But I kept rereading the words, and some part of me didn't find them funny at all. The sun dipped lower, the sky glowing orange. Shadows stretched long across the room. I cooked a small dinner, trying to ignore the unease coiling in my chest. The rules echoed in my head. Don't look outside after sunset. Don't listen to the voices. I shook it off, forcing a laugh, chewing faster than usual. By the time night fell, the silence of the forest had changed. It wasn't the gentle rustling I'd heard in daylight. Something moved out there. Leaves shivered, twigs cracked, deliberate. I told myself it was just a deer or a raccoon, but deep down, I wasn't so sure. The longer I listened, the stranger it sounded. Not like any animal I knew. The noises circled the tower, faint but steady, and then came the feeling, that heavy awareness, as if unseen eyes pressed against my back, watching. My heartbeat quickened. I thought of the notebook's warning. Don't look outside after dark. I gripped the curtain anyway, hand trembling. Every thought in me screamed not to, but slowly, against my own will, I pulled it back. Shapes. Not human, not animal, but shadows with jerky, unnatural movements, like figures trapped between dream and waking. I gasped, dropping the curtain. It snapped shut with a sharp clack, echoing too loud in the small room. My chest heaved. I told myself I imagined it. Nothing real. But another voice inside whispered differently. Those weren't forest sounds, and what I'd seen didn't belong here. That night, sleep came in broken fragments. When I closed my eyes, the forest followed me into dreams. I saw them. Tall, thin figures whispering in voices I couldn't understand. Their movements were stuttered, their limbs bending wrong. Each time I blinked, they drew closer. Every shadow leaned in, reaching. I ran through the dream, legs like lead, heart pounding, sweat pouring. The ground stretched endlessly, but I never seemed to escape. Over and over, I jolted awake, gasping, drenched. Every time, the quiet forest waited beyond the glass. Still, silent, watching. It's just your imagination, I whispered to myself. You're not used to this, that's all. I repeated it until the words lost meaning. But when dawn finally came, light spilling through the trees, I felt relief, so sharp it hurt. The darkness fled back into the woods, yet something remained, lingering like frost after October night. Sunrise made the forest glow. Golden, serene, almost holy. I stood at the window, trying to let the sight calm me, but the woods still held a shadow deeper than sunlight could touch. I dressed quickly, needing routine. Chores gave me something to focus on, checking the equipment, cleaning up, keeping busy. But distraction only went so far. The whispers began mid-morning, soft at first, carried on the wind, like a song you can't place, heard through a wall. I froze, held my breath, listened. The words weren't clear, but the cadence was. Voices. I clenched my jaw, pretending not to hear. Yet they kept drifting closer, wrapping around the tower. Over and over, a buzzing in my ears. It felt like someone had left a radio running out in the woods, just beyond reach. Never stopping. I couldn't stand it anymore. Grabbing the binoculars, I stepped out onto the deck. If something was out there, I would see it. I scanned the horizon, tree after tree, endless green rolling into mountains, miles of nothing. No hikers, no campers, no stray figures moving through the brush. The forest was empty, at least that's what my eyes told me, but the whispers still threaded through the wind, unbroken. I lowered the binoculars slowly, shame creeping in. It felt foolish, like chasing ghosts. And yet, what else was I supposed to do? 2 weeks had passed since I arrived, and still not a single person had crossed these woods. That wasn't normal. This was supposed to be a busy season. Alone on the platform, I exhaled hard. The voices seemed to shift with my breath, as if the forest itself was laughing. That night, I sat at the small desk by the radio. The rules I'd read kept circling in my thoughts. Don't answer the voices. Don't look at them. I tried writing in the old notebook myself, just to pass the time. But my pen scratched nonsense, half-finished sentences, a mind too restless to settle. When the wind rattled the glass, I flinched. The silence after was worse. I lay on the bunk bed staring at the ceiling, forcing my eyes closed. Dreams returned immediately, a stairwell, dark and endless. Footsteps climbing, slow and heavy, something just out of sight. I woke with a start, drenched again in sweat. The forest outside was still, but I could swear I heard a single knock at the door, faint as breath. I didn't move. I barely breathed. And after a moment, it was gone. Days blurred together. I kept up the routine, cooking, scanning, logging my reports. But the tension didn't fade. I tried calling Heinrich on the radio more often than necessary. He always answered, steady and calm, sometimes laughing, telling me not to worry. But when night fell, his reassurances dissolved. The forest grew louder in its silence. Every creak, every shifting branch outside felt alive. I thought about the footsteps in my dream. They'd sounded so real. One night, I heard them again, not in sleep this time, but on the metal staircase outside. Clang. Pause. Another clang. My blood ran cold. The rules returned in a flash. If you hear steps coming up the stairs at night, hide. I slid under the bed, pulling a blanket around me. The steps stopped just outside the door, and then nothing. Morning came, and with it, denial. Maybe it was just the wind knocking something loose. That's what I told myself anyway. Still, I found excuses to stay busier than before, sweeping, cleaning, pacing the observation deck. And yet, despite my efforts, the strangeness grew stronger. Midday, I heard it. A voice. It was faint, carried on the static of the old radio. "Hello?" it said. "Can you hear me?" I froze, staring at the device. The crank I'd wound earlier ticked faintly as static filled the room. I swallowed, leaning closer. "Hello?" I said, hesitant. The static cracked again. Then the voice returned, rough and broken. "You shouldn't be using this." The sound made my skin crawl, low, gravelly, filled with fear. It wasn't a friendly voice. I whispered, "Who is this?" "My name is Adrian," the voice answered. Silence followed, long enough that I thought it was gone. Then he spoke again, more urgent now. "You're not supposed to use the radio. Not unless it's life or death." I stammered. I didn't know." Adrian's voice cracked through the static again, thick with warning. "Stay inside until morning. Don't open windows. Don't go out. No matter what you hear. Do you understand?" I gripped the desk hard, knuckles white. "Yes," I whispered. The static swelled, drowning his words. But just before the line went dead, I heard one last fragment. "The rules are for a reason." Then nothing. I tapped the radio, called into it. "Adrian, can you hear me?" Only static answered. The silence in the room deepened, heavy and absolute. And suddenly, I felt more alone than ever before. I left the radio on, hoping he'd return. But it never did. That night, the wind howled through the trees, rattling the windows. Something slammed against the wall outside, a sharp, heavy bang. Then another. It sounded like rocks being hurled at the tower. The glass panes shook. I crawled under the bed again, heart hammering. The pounding grew worse. Splintering wood, shattering glass, a storm of destruction just beyond the walls. I covered my ears, whispering to myself, "Not real, not real." Hours passed like that, until suddenly it stopped, and the silence after was unbearable. Not peaceful silence, but the kind that watches. Even as dawn crept into the sky, I didn't move from beneath the bed, because I could feel it still out there. Something waiting. When morning finally arrived, I dared to crawl out. My body ached from the floor, my mind from the night. I tried to laugh at myself, to say it was only imagination, but the fear was too sharp, too real. I stepped outside briefly, blinking into the light. The forest looked the same, calm, empty. And yet, I felt eyes on me, from somewhere deep within the trees, unseen but undeniable. I shook it off and forced myself back inside. Routine again. Sweeping, checking gear, cooking. Normalcy was all I had. That evening, as the sky dimmed, a voice whispered. This time, not from the radio, but close. So close it brushed against my ear, as though someone leaned beside me. "Let me in," it whispered. "I can help you." My blood froze. The voice didn't belong to Adrian, and it wasn't mine. I stayed perfectly still, breath shallow. The voice came again, softer, coaxing. "I know what's out there. Let me in and we'll talk. I can show you the way." My skin prickled, every instinct screaming to shut it out. But the temptation was real. The promise of answers, of safety. Then came desperation. "Please, they're coming. Let me in before it's too late." I stared at the barred door, hand twitching toward the lock. A war raged inside me, curiosity against dread. Minutes stretched long, the whisper pressed, pleading, but I held my ground. Finally, dawn light touched the window, and with trembling hands, I unbolted the door. The forest beyond lay in eerie silence. Birds absent, squirrels gone. Nothing alive stirred. It was like the world itself had emptied. And still, I felt eyes watching from the tree line. I stepped outside, gear packed on my back. The tower loomed behind me, windows like hollow eyes. I didn't look back twice. The dirt road wound ahead, rough and narrow. The air was crisp, fresh. For a moment, I felt almost normal again, but then movement flickered in the brush, a shape. Two glowing eyes watching from the thicket. A deer stepped out. At least it wore the body of one, but its face, twisted, wrong, as if molded in clay by unsteady hands. Its gaze locked with mine. I reached for the hunting knife in my pocket. The thing's hooves clicked on the road as it came closer. It didn't attack. It only stared with those luminous eyes, mesmerizing, hypnotic. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then everything went black. When I woke, sunlight burned overhead. The forest was still, the deer thing gone, but the ground told another story. Two sets of tracks pressed into the dirt, one human, one hoofed, both leading away together. I shivered, pushing forward toward town, every step heavier than the last. The silence of the woods pressed in. No birdsong, no chitter of squirrels, only the groan of trees shifting in the wind. And shadows. I caught them at the corners of my eyes, darting, vanishing whenever I turned. The weight of unseen eyes never left. Sometimes I thought I heard them whisper. Sometimes I thought they laughed. I pushed harder, legs burning, throat dry. Every instinct begged me not to stop, because something was following. I knew it. Hours passed. Exhaustion clawed at me, each step heavier. I nearly collapsed when the tree line broke. Civilization. A town spread ahead, small but real. Relief rushed through me like a tide. I went straight for Heinrich. He was hard to miss, tall, bearded, weathered by age and work. "Jakob?" he said, surprised. "I thought you'd be up there another week." "I couldn't stay," I admitted, voice shaking. "Something's wrong in those woods." He frowned, arms crossing. "Wrong how?" So I told him about the whispers, the footsteps, the deer, everything. When I finished, Heinrich stared a long moment, then he burst out laughing. I bristled. "It's not funny. I'm serious." The laughter slowed. His expression hardened. "No, you're right," he said. "You're not the first." The words sank in slowly. Not the first. I stared at Heinrich, waiting for more, but he only poured himself a drink, hand steady as stone. "What do you mean?" I asked. My voice cracked under the weight of fear. He looked at me, his eyes tired. "This land remembers things," he said finally. "Not all of them kind." He leaned forward. "People have stayed in that tower before you. Not all of them came back. Some, they never left at all." My stomach turned. "You mean they died there?" Heinrich didn't answer right away. Instead, he tapped his glass. "You ever see shadows that move on their own?" I nodded slowly. He sighed. "Then you know, it's not your mind playing tricks. It's the forest. And once it notices you, it doesn't let go easy." I sat in silence, his words wrapping around me like chains, not letting go. That was exactly how it felt. Heinrich poured another drink, downing it in one motion. His hands shook now. It wasn't the liquor. "You can't stay here," he muttered. "Not in this town, not near those woods. The longer you're close, the deeper it digs in." I swallowed hard. "Then what do I do?" His eyes flicked to the window, then back. "You leave, farther than you think you need to. Don't look back, no matter what you hear." The advice chilled me, because it was almost word for word from the notebook in the tower. I wanted to press for more, but Heinrich shut down, lips tight, gaze distant. The conversation was over. I left his house uneasy. The streets of the small town suddenly felt unfamiliar, wrong, as though the forest had followed me here. I checked into the only motel in town, a squat building with peeling paint and flickering neon. The clerk barely looked up as I signed the ledger. The room smelled of mildew and smoke. The bed sagged in the middle, but at least it had 4 walls and a lock. I lay down, staring at the ceiling fan turning slow. Sleep came heavy, pulling me under like a tide. Dreams followed immediately, shadows slipping beneath my door, whispers curling into my ears. A familiar voice among them. "Adrian." "Why did you leave me?" it asked. "You promised we'd face it together." I jerked awake, sweat pouring down my back. The room was quiet, the fan still turning, but there were prints on the carpet by the door, hoof-shaped, pressed deep. Leading inside, I scrambled back against the headboard, heart pounding. The prints stopped halfway across the room. No body, no blood, just the marks pressed into the fabric. I didn't move for an hour, only stared at them, as though if I looked away, something would rise out of them. Finally, I grabbed my pack. No more sleep, no more waiting. I checked out before dawn, clerk still half asleep. The road stretched empty ahead of me, faint mist curling low across the fields. Each mile I put behind me, I felt lighter, but not safe. Never safe. Because the whispers didn't stop. They clung to the edges of my thoughts, a faint susurrus under everything. Sometimes they called my name, sometimes they laughed, and always they followed. I drove until the fuel gauge hit red. A lonely gas station appeared like a ghost on the roadside, lights buzzing, no attendant in sight. I filled the tank quickly, eyes darting to the tree line nearby, dark, thick, too much like home. Inside the station, shelves stood half empty, dust coated most of the stock. It felt abandoned, though the register still hummed. I grabbed a bottle of water, left cash on the counter, and hurried out. As I opened the door, I froze. Across the road, in the mist, stood the deer. The same wrong body, the same human-like stillness. Its eyes glowed faintly, fixed on me. I blinked, and it was gone. The mist swallowed everything. My hands trembled on the steering wheel as I pulled away. Whatever this thing was, it hadn't stayed behind in the forest. It was still with me. The road stretched endless beneath my tires. Every town I passed felt thinner, emptier, as if pieces of the world were being scraped away behind me. I stopped at another motel that night. Different bed, different ceiling, but the same dream. Adrian again. He stood at the foot of my bed, pale and silent. When he finally spoke, his words cut deep. "You can't run. They're already inside you." I jolted awake with a shout, chest heaving. The room was dark, too dark. Shadows pooled unnaturally in the corners, thick as tar. I grabbed my pack and fled without looking back. The car door slammed, my hands slick on the wheel. The night air swallowed me whole as I sped down the highway. No destination, only escape. But the farther I drove, the more I realized there was nowhere to go. Morning broke gray and cold. I found myself in another small town, one I didn't remember entering. Streets empty, shops shuttered, windows boarded as though a storm had passed through long ago. I parked in the square, engine ticking softly. A church bell rang once in the distance, then silence again. I wandered the streets, calling out, "Hello? Anyone here?" My voice echoed off stone and glass, unanswered. At the edge of town, I saw movement. A figure. For a moment, I thought it was Adrian. But when it turned, its face was smooth. No eyes, no mouth, only pale skin stretched tight. It raised a hand and pointed directly at me. The whispers surged, louder than ever, like hundreds of voices speaking at once. I stumbled back to the car and fled, tires screeching. The figure watched until the town disappeared behind me. The next days blurred together. Endless driving, endless whispers. Sometimes I saw the deer pacing the roadside. Sometimes shapes moved in the tree line, keeping pace with the car. Always there, always waiting. Exhaustion gnawed at me until I couldn't think straight. I stopped at another station, collapsed into the driver's seat with my eyes closed, and dreamed. In the dream, I was back in the tower. The notebook lay open on the desk, but this time new rules had been written inside. You cannot leave, you cannot escape. You belong to the forest now. I woke screaming, forehead pressed to the steering wheel. The whispers answered, soft and satisfied. No matter how far I drove, they were right. I was never truly leaving. Desperation drove me back toward Heinrich. I needed answers, something beyond half-truths and warnings. His cabin looked smaller than before. Smoke curled weakly from the chimney. He opened the door with tired eyes. "You shouldn't have come back," he said. "I can't stop it," I told him. "They're everywhere, even out here." He studied me for a long time, then nodded grimly. "There's only one way. You return to where it began. If you're lucky, it will end there." The tower. The cursed mountaintop. The thought chilled me, but I saw no other choice. The forest wanted me. It would take me whether I ran or not. Heinrich pressed a lantern into my hand. "For the dark," he whispered. "Don't trust the voices, not even the ones you know." The tower stood waiting, silent against the horizon, just as I left it. Only now, it felt alive. Each step up the stairs echoed hollow, as though the structure itself was breathing. The lantern flame quivered, shadows writhing along the walls. Inside, the notebook lay on the desk again, open to a blank page. The pen rested beside it. The whispers swelled until they became one voice, Adrian's. "I told you, you can't run." My hand moved without thought. I picked up the pen. Words spilled out, line after line, my own handwriting but not my own will. Rules. Warnings. The same ones I had once read in fear. The last line wrote itself, trembling across the page. Do not look outside after sunset. And as the sun fell, I realized the rules were mine now. My story had only begun.